Welcome in, everybody, to the Flagship Podcast. I am Chip Brown of Horns247.com, joined as always by the managing editor of Horns247.com, Taylor Estes. Taylor is in California at the moment, and I believe just swiped her dad's 1969 Miracle Mets World Series championship ring.
Yeah, I may have to come back to Texas with me. I saw it on his dresser. I was like, "Oh, that's a good prop for our show." So there it is, right there.
Look at that. I mean, what a cool thing. And you've gotten to you went back for their big reunion.
I did, yeah. In 2019, they had the 50-year reunion honoring that their first World Series winning team in their organization history. So that was a really neat thing. They gave us all these like replica World Series rings to the families, and then actually I think the fans got them too. But I've been telling my dad, I'm like, hey, let's check that will to see where the ring goes to, the real one. But got to keep in the family. That's all I wanted with that one.
That is so cool. Yeah, your dad scored the game-winning run in Game 4.
Game 4. Yeah, actually, it was I think it was this past weekend, would have been the 53rd anniversary of his game-winning run, and then also the World Series win there. And now the Mets, meted their way through postseason or to postseason this season, and they're out now. But hey, good memories from the past, right? That's all.
Oh yeah. So, how about that, listeners of the Flagship Podcast? Did you know that you're hanging around with greatness?
Not me.
Or near greatness.
Yeah.
Next of kin of
I just have to steal the greatness. That's what I've got to do.
first of kin. Anyway, kin of greatness. All right, Taylor. It is Texas-Oklahoma State week. We are previewing the Longhorns and the Cowboys, and after Texas's 24-21 win over Iowa State, in which Texas was able to run the football, which was such a big question going into that Iowa State game. And then all of a sudden there's Bijan Robinson, 28 carries, 135 yards, Roschon Johnson, unbelievable, 11 carries, 71 yards, and they were able to ground and pound against the Big 12's number one defense. And that was a huge test that we said needed to be cleared. And so they cleared that hurdle in the Texas defense, which ran into a bit of a fire drill when Ryan Watts went out of the game at corner. Probably shouldn't have been as much shuffling as there was, but there was. They shuffled Austin Jordan and Terrence Brooks, and then ultimately moved Jahdae Barron, the nickel, out to corner and brought in Jalen Gilbo to play the nickel, and settled down just in time for Anthony Cook to cause that fumble, and then Texas run the ball to end the game with the ball in their hands. All huge moments. We also saw Quinn Ewers get off to his first rough start in a game since Louisiana Monroe, the very first game he played in. Now, Taylor, Quinn Ewers goes on the road to make his first start in a true road game where he's not going to have fans there like he had at the Cotton Bowl. He's going to have booze and the paddles. If anyone's ever been to Boone Pickens Stadium in Stillwater, they have the padded walls, and the students slap their paddles on those padded walls. They're right on top of you. They're
right on top, like literally right. That's not even an exaggeration.
Yeah, they're like 10 feet behind you, if that.
Less than that, I would say. Yeah.
But this is where Texas has to show, after losing 4 straight true road games, this is where they have to show they can take their confidence, their maturity, their poise on the road and get it done against a team that played for the Big 12 championship last year.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it, and I think you're going to learn a lot about Quinn Ewers, where he is. I would say from a composure, from a maturity standpoint, this weekend, there's Chip. There's really not much reason to think this moment's going to be too big for him, or he's going to be rattled where it will affect him throughout the game. Maybe there probably could be some adversity that will strike, but I mean he is everything is advertised as being this cool customer, like as cool as the other side of the pillow, even when things are um, going awry a little bit, or if things still aren't going in the Longhorns' way. And that's going to definitely be needed when they take the field inside Boone Pickens Stadium. Because when you're right, I mean, when we say, so I've been on, when I used to shoot video, I'd be on the fields. And whenever I would go to Oklahoma State, I've probably told this story on the Flagship Podcast before, but the swatting of the paddles is so loud that if you're even on like in the end zone, literally for days after, I would wake up in the middle of the night and I was hearing the SWAT in my head still, like days after it, because it's so loud. It's such just a daunting atmosphere. And when we're talking about the fans being right on top of you, I mean, the away team bench, if you're a media member and you want to walk to the other side of the other end zone, and vice versa, and you do it on the away side, you have to literally walk up into the stands in order to get around the team bench, because there's literally no space between the team bench and where the fans are there. So it's a smaller, stadium, but it's easily, I would say, from at least my experience, being in various stadiums, one of the more daunting and hostile environments for a true road game that Texas plays on an annual basis. So Quinn Ewers, that maturity, that cool customer, that calm demeanor that he has shown consistently, in his very limited games that he has played at Texas, that is going to be crucial and definitely going to be a key to the game, I think, for Texas against Oklahoma State.
Yeah, and it's funny. I asked Quinn Ewers about do you like playing in hostile environments? Because one of his big breakout games in high school, his sophomore year, was in a big road game, and he killed it and announced himself as a top, quarterback recruit. And he said, you know, it's fun. He said, I like to say to my teammates, let's, even in high school, let's go show them what we're all about. And if you pick up on Quinn Ewers and you ask him about the other team, he'll always give them a compliment about what they do well.
Mhm.
And he said of Oklahoma State, they have a bunch of veteran, um, defensive linemen. He said, I'm excited. He always says, I'm excited at the end. Like if he says something nice about the opponent, he always says, I'm excited.
Mhm.
And I just think that's really cool. I think this is a guy who loves the competition, and he was up against it against Iowa State. I mean, that 3 high safety look, and as disciplined as Iowa State is, they drop linebackers to the safety level. They bring up safeties to the linebacker level. It's hard to know what you're looking at. And Quinn Ewers passed the test. And so now he heads off to Stillwater. And Taylor, the line for this game has everybody wondering what's going on, because Texas opened as a 2.5-point favorite, and then it shot to 6.5 points. And kind of like the Iowa State line, which I was like, good gravy, 16.5-point favorite against the best defense in the Big 12. But there's speculation about whether Spencer Sanders, the Oklahoma State quarterback, is fully healthy. He's had a shoulder injury, according to reports out of Stillwater. He's had a shoulder injury. His passing numbers have not been good the last 2 games. A come from behind win over Texas Tech, and then the 43-40 double overtime loss to TCU last week. He completed less than 50% of his passes in both those games. He ran the ball exceptionally well. Double-digit carries for, 4+ yards per carry, 2 touchdowns, I think, on the ground in each of those games. And so there's questions about whether Spencer Sanders is fully healthy. The backup, by the way, is Gunnar Gundy, son of Oklahoma
Okay.
State coach Mike Gundy. How about that? Gunner.
Gunner. That's
But this
interesting.
is and Mike Gundy said this week, look, we've got to run the football better because their running back, their lead running back, Dominic Richardson, Oklahoma State's only averaging right at 3.4 yards per carry in their 3 Big 12 games against Baylor, Texas Tech, and TCU. If you take Spencer Sanders' runs out of that, they're only averaging 2.8 yards per carry, Taylor. That is not good for Oklahoma State. It's great for Texas if they can make Oklahoma State one-dimensional and then really, get after Spencer Sanders because he is dangerous with his legs. We know that.
Yeah, and I feel like, you know, it'll be definitely something to watch his status as the week goes on. But the other thing with Spencer Sanders is if he gets in a rhythm, he could be absolutely detrimental to a defense and their success. But if you get him out of his rhythm, he is very almost quick a lot of times, I feel like, to make mistakes himself. And it's, I always go back to the Big 12 championship game in 2021. I mean, I think he set the record for the most interceptions thrown in a Big 12 championship game in the history of the conference. And I mean, Oklahoma State obviously was still in that game, but Baylor was getting after Spencer Sanders. They were putting the pressure on, and with the Oklahoma State, running attack not being, one of the major strengths, I would say, for this team, minus Spencer Sanders' legs, I feel like the Texas defense has got to show up early and just really try to rattle him, because he has shown he could be one of two quarterbacks. He can be one that's going to just destroy a defense and put up, video game like numbers, whether it's with his arm or his legs. And he's also shown to be at times maybe a liability, and a lot of times that comes when he gets the pressure. So the fact that he's kind of ailing a little bit, having that, it's a shoulder, right? But it's non-throwing shoulder,
Yeah,
but then the knee
Gundy
too,
would
possibly.
not give any details. He said, "I'm not talking about injuries. I'm not gonna, give up that information." I've heard it's his throwing shoulder. I've heard it's his non-throwing shoulder, but it is a shoulder injury.
Okay, because I thought I had heard something about, like, possibly a knee too. I'm not sure. Maybe there's misdirection, misinformation intentionally being put out there. So, you don't really know what to expect when he takes the field. But obviously, if Mike Gundy's not talking about injuries, that's for a reason. And so this is a prime opportunity, I think, for the Texas defense to really instill their will early and then kind of take some of that pressure off of the Texas offense, off of Quinn Ewers, and kind of, get that try as best as you can to not have their Oklahoma State home field advantage working for them, have it, kind of silence it. And that's going to be crucial, for the Texas defense too.
Yeah, it was. I mean, Oklahoma State did a great job of taking the TCU crowd out of last week's game. They got up in that game 24-7. They led 30-16 in the third quarter, and then TCU, Max Duggan, they got hot. Quentin Johnston, the former Texas commit, went nuts in that game. Double-digit catches, ridiculous. Anyone who watched the game knows that Quentin Johnston is in the groove. As we talk about the Texas defense, we mentioned Ryan Watts and the fact that he left the Iowa State game with 13 minutes left in the second quarter, and Texas really kind of lost its bearings in its pass defense. Ryan Watts, according to Steve Sarkisian, back at practice on Monday, that he was looked at, for a stinger, and Sarkisian said after the game there was nothing structural, so they were hoping that he would be back. And then he said, knock on wood, nothing serious. So we'll see. We'll see if Ryan Watts is all systems go. But wow, we've talked about it. We talked about it in our recap of the Texas Iowa State game, how valuable the guy is. And Jade Barron, when I asked him on Monday, how valuable is Ryan Watts, he said, listen, that dude is so big and long and so fast, he shuts down the boundary side of the field by himself. And that's all you can ask. I mean,
Yeah, for sure. One thing, when you touched on this about talking about the the defense and kind of the secondary having to shift a bit and moving Jahdae Barron to corner and Jalen Gilbo coming in to fill that nickel thing. I think that the fact that Texas was able to do that shows how important it is to have players that can cross train at both or a lot of the positions in the secondary, because you're right, when Ryan Watts left that game, I mean, it was you feel for Terrence Brooks and Austin Jordan a bit, because those are true freshmen and they were just getting picked on. And it was like Iowa State was not letting up. They were going to continue to throw to the side of the field that they were on. And so, and that was not a knock on them. I mean, these are literally true freshmen. I mean, these are guys that haven't gotten a ton of playing time in the secondary. So I feel like that was that probably went over or overlooked a little bit coming out of that game, that Texas kind of shifting, players out of position into different positions was so crucial. And that goes to show that, I feel like the players have such a better understanding of this defense this year than they did last year, because there's no way in heck that they would have been able to do that and have it not work against them. I would say in 2021, that being something that kind of helped them stay in the game, not give up a lot of big touchdowns or anything like that. I think that should probably have been addressed and mentioned a lot more than it did. But yeah, I mean, it's the fact that Ryan Watts will sounds like maybe back is huge, because with a quarterback like Spencer Sanders, if he gets going, he can pick you apart, with his arm too, and that could be a long day in Boone Pickens Stadium if Ryan Watts weren't on the field, I would say.
Yeah, yeah. And it does sound like if Ryan Watts couldn't play or was limited or had to leave the game, that they would move Jahdae Barron from nickel to corner and bring in Jalen Gilbo to play the nickel. Because Steve Sarkisian, when I asked about Ryan Watts and his importance to the defense, Sarkisian mentioned, I think it was really good to get Jahdae out there at corner. So clearly he felt like that was the best option, or at least that's the way he sounded,
Mhm.
coming out of that Iowa State game, because and he had sort of a message to Terrence Brooks and Austin Jordan that you got to see your impact, good and bad,
Mhm.
by playing. So prepare. And that's something that we talk about all the time. Young players want to play. Veteran players want to win. And the young players have to get in the film room and prepare like they're going to be a starter that day, just like a quarterback does, and especially at corner,
Mhm.
because you're the last line of defense. And as Austin Jordan found out the hard way, if the safety bites up on play action and you're one-on-one and you're, giving up the inside of the field, you better get on your horse and be able to catch up. And obviously Austin Jordan couldn't on that 54-yard touchdown to Jalen Knoll in the Iowa State game. So, we're watching that closely because Texas has been so good at not giving up explosive passing plays all season until that Iowa State game. And then here comes Oklahoma State, who always has fast guys you've never heard of at receiver. Sometimes you have, like Des Bryant,
Yeah.
but they always have guys who make plays, and you're going to have to cover the whole field. So this is going to be a good test if Ryan Watts is not out there, for Texas to show that they can adjust. And so, Taylor, one thing I want to get to before we get to love it or leave it. I mean, this is really, let's call it what it is. It's an elimination game, in my opinion, for the Big 12 title race.
Mhm.
Um, I know Mike Gundy's saying he thinks that one team will get into that championship game with 2 conference losses. And if that's the case, then it's not. But for Texas, going on the road at Kansas State next week, they still have to, go to Kansas. They got Baylor. Let's call it what it is. I mean, this is a must win for Texas, especially with Oklahoma State's offense not having much of a running game right now.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I totally agree with that, and I think that obviously Texas does have the bye in between the Oklahoma State game and the K State game, but prior to the season, Chip, like you and I talked about what games could present, issues to Texas, whether it's expected or possibly, one that comes out of nowhere. And we both expected both Oklahoma State and Kansas State being a really, really problematic scenario being set up for Texas, even though there is a bye week. I was doing a radio interview this morning on Tuesday on a station in Oklahoma City, and that bye week coming out of the Oklahoma State game is going to have to be probably one of the best bye weeks from a preparation standpoint for what lies ahead, even more so, I think, than what you would have expected prior to the season. I thought the K State game was going to be one that was going to be a challenge to start the month of November. I didn't necessarily think TCU would be sitting at a position where they're undefeated right now and potentially could have at most 2 losses when Texas plays them. Didn't expect Kansas to be anywhere as good as what they are. And then, wrapping up the season with Baylor. The month of November is going to be a really tough one every single week. And it starts against or at Kansas State, a place where Texas historically just has not played very well when they're on the road there in Bill Snyder Family Stadium. That can really set the tone for what lies ahead from like conference, contending for the conference title standpoint for this Texas team. But it starts at Oklahoma State too. And it will be interesting to see how the conference race plays out. I feel like there's really a lot of parity in the Big 12 this season. I mean, it kind of seemed that way entering it, but even more so now. And we're at the midway point, just because teams, I think, that were not really expected to be playing at the level that they are kind of surprised a lot. And TCU is one of them. I mean, a new first year head coach in Sonny Dykes. I still think Texas does have a substantial advantage in that matchup with Gary Patterson being on the Texas staff. Obviously, that's a team that it's full of his guys. He knows the strengths, the weaknesses, where you can get them, where they can get you. So that definitely works in Texas' advantage, but still, it doesn't mean that it's going to change the outcome of the game either. So there's a lot of football to be played, and it's kind of interesting because I feel like after that Texas Tech game, I'm not sure that we would have thought a few weeks later that we'd be sitting here saying that Texas could contend for a Big 12 title, because it was kind of one of those where it's like, they were, what were they, 2-2 on the season, and they had that loss in the way that they lost in a lot of games in 2021. It kind of was like, oh gosh, have they turned that corner? I think they have turned that corner. That's a big deal. I think that shows the culture, the buy-in from the team, and that's going to have to continue probably more than it did in the beginning of the season with the slate of games still on the schedule for Texas if they truly do want to contend for a Big 12 title.
Yeah, Blackjack Joey McGuire, rolling the dice on fourth down over and over again. Jade Barron, when I asked him about what has this defense learned, what has this team learned since Texas Tech, he said, we just weren't prepared for them to go for it on fourth down as much as they did. Now we expect everybody to go for it on fourth down every time. And when they don't, it's, oh, okay. So that's an important adjustment to make. And think about this, Taylor, the 4-game losing streak in true road games dates back to last year, but it includes that loss at Texas Tech. And so, 1-5 in true road games under Steve Sarkisian. The one win was at TCU last year when Bijan Robinson ran for more than 200 yards. And TCU proved to be one of the worst teams in the league and fired Gary Patterson. So this is a monumental step for Texas, because this is a gauntlet they're in right now. Iowa State, number 1 defense. Oklahoma State played for the Big 12 title last year. K-State doesn't have a conference loss yet. And K-State will play TCU this week. K-State coming off a bye and getting TCU after that emotional win over Oklahoma State. So, little bit of, we'll see if Deuce Vaughn's healthy and how K-State handles that. And then obviously Texas will play TCU at home in Austin on November 12th. So this is a 4-game gauntlet for the Longhorns, and Oklahoma State's kind of in the middle or in the second half of their gauntlet. They had to go to Baylor. Then they had a come from behind win at home against Texas Tech, and then they had to go to TCU, lost a big lead. We'll see how they respond, because that's gut-wrenching stuff. Texas fans know about that, and the Texas Longhorns know about it. It can deflate you, and you start to let that doubt creep in, and it can change your season. So fascinating to think about as Texas tries to put all those issues in their rearview mirror and show everyone that they're a tougher, more poised, more mature team that can handle the hostile environment on the road, especially in a tight ball game like they were in last week, where they have a 10-point lead, lose it, fall behind, have to win it in the final minutes, and they pulled it off.
Yeah. And it's one thing to think about too is 4 of the top 5 scoring offenses in the Big 12 are left on Texas' schedule, including, let me see, I just had the stats up. Number 1, TCU still out there, Oklahoma State, Kansas, and Baylor. Those are the top half of the Big 12 in scoring offense, with Baylor averaging the least amount of points at 37.8 points per game. So defense has to travel. Defense needs to set the tone, and defense needs to show up week in and week out, because they're going to be facing a really tough challenge and slate of games moving forward here in Big 12 play, Chip.
Well, and real quickly, Oklahoma State's special teams among the best in the Big 12. Their field goal kicker, Tanner Brown, is 12 of 12 on the season. Their punter, Tom Hutton, averages 44 yards a kick, and they have 2 home run threats in the return game, led by Jaden Dixon, who has a kick return for a touchdown this season. Brennan Presley, equally dangerous on punt returns. So Oklahoma State's a team that relies on its special teams to get hidden yards, hidden points. And although Gundy said, we got to stop kicking so many field goals, we're not getting enough touchdowns when we get into the red zone. So Texas, one of the best red zone defenses in the Big 12. That will need to continue for the Longhorns. All right, Taylor, you ready for some love it or
Oklahoma
leave
State
it?
also is the only team in the Big 12 that has a kickoff return for a touchdown so far.
Boom. You ready for some love it or leave it?
I am. Before we get to love it or leave it, we're going to take a really quick break, but stay tuned, because we have much more preview of Texas and Oklahoma State coming up. We'll be right back. And if you're watching us on the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel, we will roll on here to love it or leave it. Chip, before we start this, I apologize if my audio is echoing. My parents don't have the greatest room set up for me to record this podcast, and I'm pretty sure I'm sitting in like the loudest chair ever. So if you hear little noises, I promise it's not me, it's the chair. But
Good.
all that to say, okay. So you ready for some love it or leave it?
Yeah.
All right. First one for you is love it or leave it. Even though it's a road game, Texas is catching Oklahoma State at the right time. Little preference for this after Oklahoma State has had to fight through physical battles and wins at Baylor, home against Texas Tech, and then in last week's double OT loss at TCU. Love it or leave it.
I mean, this is crazy to say, because Oklahoma State played for the Big 12 title a year ago and came from behind and beat Texas in Austin last year. But let's be honest, a lot of those playmakers are gone. Jalen Warren, their running back, is gone. Their secondary that was so good is gone. And Oklahoma State has the worst pass defense in the Big 12, and they just got riddled with huge plays in the passing game by TCU. So maybe there's some doubt. Spencer Sanders may not be 100%. And they just came out of that battle with TCU. I'm going to love this, even though I think this is stuff that, fans tend to grab onto more than well-coached football teams. It just seems like Spencer Sanders is not throwing the football the way that he can, with these last two games being sub 50% completion rate. We already talked about the fact that their running game is depleted. It's not, it's 2.8 yards per carry when you take out Spencer Sanders rushing yards. So I'm going to love this, even though I think this is going to be an absolute war into the fourth quarter, probably lead changes in the fourth quarter. But Taylor, I'm going to love this. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard not to love it, especially with the injury or potential injury status of Spencer Sanders being a factor entering this game. Um, I think on the flip side, I think that this game is coming at a good time for Texas as well because, after that OU game, they were getting all this hype, all this attention, and they were kind of punched in the mouth a little bit against Iowa State. They ended up winning that game, a game that I don't think that they would have won not just last year, but honestly for a few years in this Texas program. And that's a win is a win is a win. I know there's things that people can nitpick, but I feel like that should have been a kind of come to Jesus game for Texas, and it came at the right time because you don't want that game to come on the road at Oklahoma State, especially with the road games that Texas still does have on the schedule. Because I feel like that could be something that could creep into the locker room. Doubt could creep in on if they are ever going to be able to compete in road games, just because of the record they've had. So I do think that Texas is catching Oklahoma State at the right time. I One thing is, I would say that because Oklahoma State has such a pretty mature and veteran offense led with Spencer Sanders, their offensive line is full of upperclassmen. There may be a kind of let's let's prove ourselves that we still are a title contender, and let's beat this Texas team that has the same record as us in conference play. I think that could also work in their favor. But the injury, potential injury status of Spencer Sanders, the run game not being really a huge strength right now. And then I think that definitely adds to Texas, or is working in Texas' favor, I would say. And as long as they can continue, where they left off against Iowa State, kind of grinding out a win, making the plays when it matters most. And I think that it's going to come on the defense too, getting after Spencer Sanders early and often. I do think that the defense has done a better job of that this season. So all that kind of adds up to, a lot more working in Texas' favor. Now, I'm not sitting here saying that Oklahoma State's going to roll over and just take it, or anything like that. I mean, Texas is going to have to bring their A game, but this is a better situation, I would say, for the Longhorns than I probably would have expected it to be prior to the start of the season against this Oklahoma State team. So yeah, I'm gonna love this too.
Okay, number two.
Second one is love it or leave it. Despite Quinn Ewers' rough start last week against Iowa State, Texas has nothing to worry about with Ewers in his first true road start.
Oh my gosh. I'm losing my mind. Um, I don't know why I'm giving this kid the benefit of the doubt, but he just seems to thrive in these big stage hostile environments after what we saw him do against Oklahoma. And that was an Oklahoma defense that was trying to find itself. Oklahoma State's pass defense is worse than Oklahoma's. That's a bad recipe for the Cowboys when Quinn Ewers is the one dialing up the passes, because this guy processes pretty well for a guy making his first ever true road start. So something tells me that Quinn Ewers, after hearing about his rough start against Iowa State, is going to be pretty locked in for this game. Jordan Whittington, Xavier Worthy, JT Sanders are a lot for a pass defense ranked 126th of 131 in FBS to handle. So Taylor, I'm gonna love this again against my better judgment. But how about you?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard for me not to love it. And I don't think that you're crazy to say that. I mean, Quinn Ewers hasn't really shown anything that would make you think that some environment is going to be too much for him. I mean, think about the way he started. I know it was a home game, but still, like think about the way he started against Alabama. I mean, he was so effective in that first quarter. And I think obviously the game in the Cotton Bowl against Oklahoma, not the same Oklahoma team of years past, but still that environment in the first half was pretty. It's a daunting environment still for any first time quarterback starting in that game, and he just was as calm as can be. I mean, I would say he was maybe a little less calm against Iowa State, which is funny a little bit since it was a home game. But I agree with you in thinking that I think he is kind of chomping at the bit when he gets to be in a position where he's in a tough environment. And it seems like, at least in his high school career, early in college, that it kind of fuels him a little bit. And so there's not really much reason to think he's not going to have, or he's going to like crumble or something like that in this environment. Now, that's not saying any knock on Oklahoma State. Again, it's a tough environment to play in, but I feel like the way that Quinn Ewers kind of keeps his composure, you know, um, handles himself, doesn't let get too high, keep too low, anything like that. That I think that's crucial, and I think that's the reason why you shouldn't worry. I wouldn't say nothing to worry about, but I wouldn't be too concerned with Quinn Ewers in his true road start. There's obviously some things, if things go poorly. I'm not saying he's going to have a perfect game or something. He throws an interception or something like that. But like right now, he hasn't really shown any type of situations where it's like, oh, he's going to continue to make those same mistakes when he does actually make them in game. He seems to be, as Steve Sarkisian said, he's very coachable in game. He corrects the mistakes he does make in game, and so I think that's going to play well on the road and should alleviate some of the worry that maybe some Texas fans may have with him being in his first true road start against a talented Oklahoma State team.
Yeah, I'm more concerned about Quinn Ewers at K-State, which also can play that 3-high safety look that Iowa State does and play it really well. I'm more concerned about Quinn Ewers in that game than I am in this game. All right, love it or leave it, number 3.
All right. Final one is love it or leave it. With Bijan Robinson and Roschon Johnson running the ball effectively last week against the Big 12 number 1 run defense in Iowa State, Texas will be able to run against anyone.
I don't know if they'll be able to run against anyone. I'm gonna leave this, but this was a huge step forward, I think, for this offensive line and for the running backs and their chemistry with the offensive line, because you run the ball like Texas did against Iowa State, who plays that, you know, three
3-8 cloud or whatever.
3-5-3
Yeah.
defense as well as anyone. I just think that Texas now, from a confidence standpoint, is just going to keep getting better and better with their running game. And so I expect Texas to be able to run the ball. I don't know if it's 200 yards this week, but definitely 150, 175. They're going to need to ground out this win once they are in position, either late or early. Um, if they're fortunate enough to get up 31-17 like they were at Texas Tech, they couldn't run the ball to end that game. They need to be able to run the ball to end any game that they're in a situation like that again. So I just think that victory over Iowa State and the way Bijan Robinson and Roschon Johnson, who are sore, I mean, they're beat up after that game, but they got to turn around and do it again, Taylor, and they got to do it on the road. So I'm going to leave this, but I do think that Iowa State game is going to give them confidence when they're in a tight situation that they'll be able to run it to end games or to take control of games. How about you?
I'm kind of torn on this one, honestly. And maybe I'll eat my words or something later in this, but it's hard for me not to think that they can run against anyone. Honestly, I'm kind of compelled to love this because that Iowa State rush defense was the best in the conference and one of the top in the country too. And the fact that Texas had 2 running backs combined for over 200 yards rushing on the ground was so critical. And mind you, that's when the Texas passing game wasn't extremely effective a lot. I mean, I'm not saying that Quinn Ewers was bad at it or anything, but still, I mean, Bijan Robinson, Roschon Johnson rushed for more yards than Quinn Ewers threw for that game. Even though neither one of them saw the end zone, Quinn Ewers did have 3 passing touchdowns. Still, I mean, that to me, if as long as they're healthy and as long as the offensive line remains healthy, intact, and playing, continuing to progress and grow with each game and get better with each game and experience, it's going to be really hard for me to deny that Texas could run the ball against anyone between Roschon Johnson and Bijan Robinson. Steve Sarkisian's talked about maybe Bijan Robinson isn't getting enough national attention, especially because, when teams line up against him, they're looking for number 5. They're doing everything they can to stop the run, and he still is rushing for 100 yards. I think he has 5 games with over 100 yards, 5 straight games with over 100
That's
yards
right.
rushing. I think 6 total games. I think the only game he didn't rush for 100 yards was Alabama, I believe. So yeah, I mean, but then, on the flip side also, Roschon Johnson doesn't get anywhere near the respect or attention, I think, too, because, I mean, he still finished that game against Iowa State with over 70 yards rushing. I think it was 6.5 yards per carry. That 1-2 punch between Bijan Robinson and Roschon Johnson is really special. And as long as the offensive line continues to progress week in and week out in a way that I feel like they have, probably more so than I would have given or expected them to, just because it's so young. It's such a young offensive line. There's not a single upperclassman starter on the offensive line. I feel like they're playing better than I would have imagined them to prior to the start of the season. So all of that seems to be adding up to Texas being able to effectively run the ball against probably any team in the country. I really do believe that right now. So I'm gonna disagree with you there, and I'm gonna love this. I think that this is a special running attack that Texas has. The offensive line's gelling better than I would have imagined prior to the season, and so there's no reason for me to doubt that their ability to run the ball against any elite run defense, especially after what they did against Iowa State, which is one of the best in the country too.
Yeah. Yeah. Baylor and Kansas State also among the top run defenses in the Big 12. Still on the schedule for Texas. That Kansas State game, I'm just going to give y'all a little hint. That's the game that really, really concerns me. But first things first, Oklahoma State, 2:30 ABC on Saturday in Stillwater. Should be great. Taylor and I will be right back here on the Flagship Podcast after the game to give you our thoughts. So make sure that you're dialed in, and also make sure that you check out our Flagship Podcast interview that came out on Monday with Sam Mays, the former All-American offensive lineman at Oklahoma State. Hint, you'll want to listen because he's pretty impressed with Texas.
Yeah, the things he said about Texas, I think the fans that are questioning Texas after that close win over Iowa State definitely need to listen to what Sam Mays, a former All-American offensive lineman, went to Oklahoma State. So it's not some Texas fan that's putting out these takes or anything like that. This is a guy that has every reason not to like Texas, and he is just so impressed with what he has seen, especially on offense with Quinn Ewers, the whole offense, everything. So yes, absolutely. If you have doubts in your mind about the game against Iowa State or questioning the performance or the defense giving up that many points to, not one of the top scoring offenses in the conference, just listen to what Sam said, because he was pretty nails, I think, with his takes there.
Yeah, and he told me as we were signing off that his favorite player in the Big 12 is Kelvin Banks, the freshman left tackle at Texas. He said this guy is going to be 3 and done, and the highest offensive draft pick that Texas has had in a decade. So, yeah. So check out that interview with Sam Mays at Horns 24/7, all of our podcast platforms, wherever you listen to podcasts, the Flagship Podcast interview, and make sure you're checking out the Longhorn Blitz with Jeff Howe and Rod Babers, and State of Recruiting with Mike Roach and Hudson Standish, our teammates at Horns 24/7. Thanks, everybody, so much for listening. For Taylor Estes, I am Chip Brown. Until next time, we'll see you over at horns247.com. Until then, stay safe and keep the faith.